Welcome to AFI Fest 2020, presented by Audi. I'm Eric Moore, a member of the programming team here at the festival. First, I want to thank our festival supporters, our presenting sponsor Audi, and our AFI members, and especially you, our audience. Thank you for joining us today. When we saw WHIRLYBIRD at Sundance, we knew we had to bring it to AFI Fest. Besides it being a new quintessential Los Angeles film, it's also a riveting story about an American family. We are joined today by director Matt Yoka and film subject Marika Gerrard. Director and producer Matt Yoka has worked on many projects with Vice Media and also directed music videos for musicians such as Ty Segall, whose music you heard in the film. WHIRLYBIRD premiered at Sundance Film Festival in January to much acclaim. And you've already had the pleasure to meet Marika through the film, but let me introduce our moderator today, who you also met through the film. It's NBC News anchor, correspondent Katy. So after graduating from University of California in 2005, Tur decided to pursue her career in journalism just like her parents. She emerged as a breakout broadcaster in 2016 while covering the Trump campaign for NBC News and MSNBC. She's also the author of the New York Times bestselling book, Unbelievable, the front row seat to the craziest campaign in American history. So welcome Matt, Marika, and Katy, and thank you so much for joining us. And take it away, Katy.
Hello, everyone. I've moderated a few of these discussions for AFI in the past. This one will be the first time it is about me and my family, so it's going to be a bit of an unusual experience. Perhaps more interesting than most. Mom, I'm going to get to you in a moment, but I do want to start with you, Matt. How many hours of footage did you have to go through to put this film together?
At this point, it's almost just a guess now. But last we checked, we're past about 2,000 hours. So that would be about 3,000 quarter-inch and digibeta tapes that we digitized, and one by one, starting from what we felt were the oldest, working our way all the way up to the last tapes, clocked in about 2,000 hours. So that wasn't me personally, though. I probably watched I don't even know how many hours I've watched maybe 300, 200 hours, something like that. So, but it was a team, an editorial team. So it was my main editor, Brian Palmer, as well as a couple other editors, assistant editors. We all just kind of logged it and put the story together from there.
You filter it down to what you needed to watch.
Yeah, we did.
How did you do that?
Oh, how did we do it? Well, before I really started digging into the archive, I'd already done preliminary interviews with your mom and with Zoey, and had many discussions with them, and more or less kind of felt like I knew the trajectory of the story. I knew what kind of story we wanted to tell. And so that then, and that was primarily the relationship of Zoey and Marika. And so it's funny because I talk about Zoey and Marika so often when I'm doing interviews. It's rarely to their daughter. So now I'm like, your mom. And anyway, so we sort of narrowed it down to a relationship story. And that relationship story became the way in which we experienced these huge historical events like the riots or OJ. And so as we went through the archive, we looked for the intimate, the personal, things like you taking your first steps, things like that, you know?
What I know you had the idea of the story in your head, and I know you had an idea of who my dad is. That's why you were interested in doing this in the first place. But when you watched all that footage, is there anything that surprised you?
Good question. I think that what I was surprised by was how vivid the family story was. And I remember talking early on, both with your dad and your mom, about their career and kind of just really hyper-focused on that work. And as I started watching the archive, just these incredibly dynamic personal lives started coming out of it. I always reference the tape where Marika is pregnant with you. And so I just remember the first time I saw it, it was the color was so beautiful, the actual image quality was so beautiful, and your parents had this kind of naive pre-parental glow, and the way that they were talking to each other, I found to be just so enthralling. And then on top of it, because your parents' personal and professional life was just completely intertwined, in that same tape where your mom is pointing to her stomach saying that she's pregnant with you, they're also saying how they've taken you to fires and plane crashes and news events, and that they have this company called the Los Angeles News Service. And so it was just like a wave of I knew at that moment that I could tell a story that had a lot more humanity to it. And so that, I think, is what surprised me.
I wonder if you could tell that when you interviewed me, I had that pre-parental glow, because I was actually just starting to show with Teddy, my son.
No, you didn't tell me. I didn't know that. I didn't know you were pregnant when we did.
I wasn't telling anybody. It was still a secret. I just met you. I wasn't going to tell you.
Fair enough.
Mom, first of all, we're sitting exactly the same way, which is fitting. Mom, it had to have been hard for you to watch that film at times.
It was. You kind of have to detach. So I felt like I detached from what I was seeing. I was watching somebody else almost on the screen.
The same way you detached yourself from what you were covering when you put your eye on the viewfinder of the camera?
Absolutely. If you've ever done, I'm sure you have done camera work, it's almost like you're not there. You're watching it.
You know I have. You say I'm sure you have, as if like we don't actually know each other. You know I've done camera work.
Yeah, I remember that one time where you shot and I fell over backwards. So yeah. No, I was shooting when I fell over backwards. I don't remember.
Sure, you were shooting. I mean, you said you have to detach yourself. Do you, looking back on your life, which is, synthesized into just a couple of hours, or at least the adult part of your life, do you look back and think to yourself, oh my God, I'm so proud of all we've done? Or do you think to yourself, what a horrifying 20 years? I mean, what is your reaction when you look at all of it put into such a neat little package?
Well, what is interesting to me is other people's reaction. And a lot of people go, oh my God, you were hanging out of a helicopter. And I got so used to it that I didn't think that, oh my God, I'm hanging out of a helicopter. Oh, you're so brave. I go, no, I'm a very fearful person. What are you talking about? So it is really odd. But I'm really glad to have something to show you so that you can remember the stuff that you were too young to remember.
What about your relationship with Dad?
Do we have to talk about that?
I think it's the subject of the film, so yes. You're the one who said yes to this, just FYI. This was not my decision, and I was unwillingly dragged into it at the very end.
Well, I think the movie speaks for itself. Can we leave it at that?
I mean, we can. Do you find it difficult to relive that? I found it difficult to watch.
Very difficult too. That's one of the reasons I haven't looked at the video for a long time. I have now I have a database with all of that video, which I can license, and it's taken me till now to really be able to look at it because it brings back so many memories. A lot of good memories and a lot of bad memories.
You can tell me now. We'll put Matt on mute. Do you think the film was fair?
I think Matt did an amazing job, even if he's on mute. I will tell him that. He totally blew me away with how well he distilled 15 years of my life into an hour, 2 hours.
I guess, we're living in a much more corporate media world than we were in the 90s. We're also living in a time where things are very policed in terms of what you can say on TV and what you can do, and just everyone's lives are all on social media, and so everything is very out in the open, and people are more restricted and constricted than they used to be. What was striking to me about the film, and taking my personal relationship out of it, was how much news in Los Angeles and the way you guys were going about it really did resemble the wild, wild west. There seemed to be no rules, and that you guys were just making it up as you go along, as you went along. Frankly, it seemed a lot more fun.
Well, it's funny.
Right
We
now.
would say the opposite. We said that it was more fun 20 years before we started because it was too corporate when we were working. But what's funny right now is that when you say that you are more constrained, you are less constrained on camera, but more constrained off camera, I think. Nobody really knew what was happening off camera because we didn't have Twitter and all that. But they were very concerned with what we were doing on camera. It was much more, you were supposed to dress a certain way when you were on camera. And your dad actually broke a lot of the rules about how you were supposed to report and how you were supposed to be completely detached from what you were reporting and never be part of the story. And that is kind of completely gone by the wayside these days.
Matt, I mean, as somebody who, you're pretty young, I'm sure you weren't as plugged into the world of news in the 90s as most people or people that are older were. How did you feel looking at it? Did you think, wow, this feels different? Or what was your reaction?
I guess as I was making the film, there was a point in which it occurred to me that the film was actually a lot more personal than just the fact that I'm from Los Angeles. And I think that the reason, or the way in which that hit me was just that my childhood growing up in the city was watching the work that your parents did. Mm-hmm. So my memory of the city as I absorbed it personally, whether I was taken, downtown with my parents or overhearing my parents and their friends and our family talking, it was on the TV watching the work that your parents were doing. I mean, it almost took me back when I realized that it wasn't just the work that they did. I was actually looking at what your mom looked at. I was putting on, I'd almost talk it like a VR goggles or something to watch the work of your parents, is to actually see what your mom saw or see what your dad saw if Zoey was filming. And so I think in that sense, it became an exploration of kind of my childhood in a way. And so I think that the film allowed me to kind of develop a more emotional connection to something that had kind of become this larger than life work that they'd amassed. Now, how does it compare to the work of today? I think you're totally right. It's a very scrappy operation that they had. And I think it was this pure ambition and maybe recklessness that your dad bought a helicopter when she's 26 years old, before she even has a license, and then your mom is strapped up and filming out of the side of the helicopter. And I think your comparison to the Wild Wild West was something, that's what we talked about that a lot. And it was almost this metaphor. We kind of referred to, while we were making the film, we sometimes referred to your parents as sort of the last cowboys, and that the helicopter people in Los Angeles are kind of the last truly free people throughout the city in the West. So I think that Western tradition kind of lived through your parents in a lot of ways, and it shows in their work.
You talk about recklessness. I thought it was completely responsible and safe to shove Larry Welk out of the helicopter.
Yeah. Or to have you as the co-pilot when you're, 9 years old.
I wasn't really the co-pilot. I like to tell people that I flew helicopters as a kid, but really I just put my hands on the joystick for a second.
You sold it.
You were about 5 in that video, by the way.
Yeah.
Very talented and wise 5, beyond my years. Why did you make the decision, Matt, to be on The Family? You had me, my brother, my mom, my dad. The only other interview in the entire thing, correct me if I'm wrong, is Larry Welk. Why just him?
Well, I'll say that we interviewed a couple other people as well, some other helicopter pilots, former news director, Jeff Wald, who I know you know, and as well as some people that were involved in various news stories that they covered as subjects of those stories. And as we got into the film, the intimacy of the family's account of the experience really, I think, was the heart of the film, in that I felt that sort of the other voices became almost unnecessary context that sometimes you see in other documentaries where it's just kind of third person perspectives that essentially say what you can already kind of deduce as the audience. And the intimacy that the family brought, I thought, became essential, and I wanted to keep us in that. Larry, in a lot of ways, I felt was sort of the son that that Zoey and Marika never had, that your parents never had, and I think the relationship, particularly between Larry and Zoey, was on a father-son kind of relationship, at least a very, very deep mentor experience. And so I kind of we thought of Larry as the honorary son in the family. And then I think he also was able to bring just a little bit of outside perspective that helped. In his introduction, when we bring him in, he said he quickly learned that the Los Angeles News Service wasn't your typical news operation. And I think just having a slight outsider perspective helped with that. But ultimately, I saw him as a family member.
It is interesting because a lot of the people from that era are not people that we have any association with any longer. And a lot of when, and Mom, you correct me if I'm out of line, but after everything fell apart in the late 90s, a lot of the people that were essentially a part of the family were excommunicated. They were persona non grata. Larry was one of them. When I heard that you spoke to Larry, I remember thinking, oh my God. Like, I remember all of the emotion that my parents had toward my dad, mostly toward Larry, rise up in me. And I remember feeling like a sort of surprise, one, that he would be involved, surprise, and a little bit of, took a little offense that he would be involved, but then also a longing for this childhood that we had lost. What was it like interviewing Larry, knowing that my mom and dad and him did not depart on good terms?
The way I felt when I talked to many people about their experiences with the Los Angeles News Service was a very kind of conflicted feeling. And I think there was a lot of baggage from the intensity of the job, the intensity that your dad brought to the job, but also a lot of reverence and appreciation despite all of that. And I thought that Larry had embodied both of those perspectives. He had a complicated emotional relationship with it, but he had a deep respect for what he learned. And he knows and would say, I didn't have to pry it out of him to say just how great he thought the work that Zoey did over the years, and that he wouldn't be who he is if it wasn't for Zoey and for Marika. And so I think that enough time had passed where he felt comfortable talking about the good and the bad of the experience, and that that makes for a good interview subject. So
Mom,
yeah.
what do you think of that?
I was like you. I was a little worried about just exactly how your dad was going to react to it, for one thing, and what Larry's response was going to be. And but on the other hand, I was really glad, because I've always liked Larry, and I was really glad to reconnect with him. And I was
Larry went and did the job he was doing for us, and basically took the jobs from you. Larry became a helicopter pilot and undercut the business, and suddenly Larry was employed by the stations, and you were not employed.
Right. So there was, as you can imagine, there was some bad blood between us. But on the other hand, that is kind of the way it works in this business. You know, you work as long as you can at the job you're at, and then when you get offered something better, you take it. And he, as I recall, he wasn't that underhanded about it. There was other people that worked for us that actually went behind our back. Larry did come in and say, look, I've been offered this job. And in part, I think that even your dad felt like it was a great opportunity for Larry.
Yeah. Okay. Mom, do you see the story as a tragedy or a hero's journey?
Oh, that's a really good question. Not a tragedy. Definitely not a tragedy. Maybe aren't all our stories a hero's journey? Pretty much. It's definitely a journey, and I don't have any real regrets. I'm sure there are things I might have done differently, but I think that in the end, things came out okay.
Do you regret getting into the news business?
No, I love being in the news business, and I think that the things that we did in the news business, I'm very proud of. There's some things that I'm not proud of in terms of things that happened personally, and I'm hoping that you guys forgive me for all the time that I spent away from you and not paying as much attention to you as I could have.
I don't think my brother or I minded that. I think it was more when you guys no longer were working, that you were always around, and we wanted you to go do something and be great again. Because when you were in the helicopter, you were living an exciting life, and we were living it with you. We were proud of it. I certainly am proud of it. You say you don't regret getting into the news business, but both you and Dad had a terrible reaction to me getting into the news business. Yours wasn't as bad. Dad told me that I would, I'd end up asking if you want fries with that for a living, if I decided to go down this path.
I was very happy that you got in the news business. I was really proud of you, and I thought, wow, you can
even though it ended as badly as it did for you guys, even though you knew that everyone's time runs out and nobody gets out of this business.
Right, but you have an opportunity to really do something, to really make a difference in the world. And look what you've done. I think I'm so proud of what you've done. I think it's amazing. Both you and Jamie have taken the mantle from us and have gone someplace with it. I mean, how could you not be proud of that?
You know, I just wanted to add to that, because I think talking, Katy, about you getting into the news business, something that, you know, I discovered when making the film was, in a certain way, you were always in the news business, and you never. It seemed like on destiny that you would end up where you are. And we spoke several times about how the story, it really is the story of your mom and your dad and their career and relationship, but also the subtext is it's sort of your origin story as a news person. And so, you know, that unbelievable moment where your dad is having you do a news report in the film, it just seemed like you were already on your way.
I feel like, Katy, you were able to see the things that went wrong in our life and correct them and go on and become even better, which is, what more can you ask for?
I think I wish. I think your rows of Emmys and your Murrow and your Peabody and your Spot News Awards, what are the Mark Twain Awards? The ones I do not have, by the way.
There's time.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm getting up there. Mom, what was to you the most memorable news story? We showed a lot of them, or Matt showed a lot of them in the doc. What is the one that stood out to you?
The riots, Reginald Denny beating. Absolutely, that's got to be the top story that we did. Then followed by OJ. But OJ, because that was the weird LA combination of celebrity and a car chase and a murder. I mean, it was like, when is that ever going to happen? But in terms of just the drama of it, watching the Reginald Denny beating was just amazing.
I have one more, but we've reached our limit, so I'm going to ask it anyways. Mom, do you do you see yourself as the kind of underdog in all of this? My dad was and is so overpowering as a personality, bigger than life. And you've always been much, much quieter and you keep more to yourself. But at the same time, you were hanging out of the helicopter holding a camera on your shoulder. You were listening to the scanners. You were at the very least 50% of the operation. Do you feel like you've gotten enough love and credit?
There were times that I felt like I didn't get enough credit, but it was my choice to be more in the background. So I have to give myself a little bit of the blame for that. But there have been many times when people have said, "Oh my God, you know, your ex-husband shot that amazing tape at Florence and Normandy," and I say, "Yeah, really?"
You're like, "No, actually, that was me, and the bullet holes in the battery underneath my seat were directed at me, not him flying the helicopter. I'm the one that almost got shot."
But on the other hand, I have a story to tell that people haven't heard. So.
That is true. Matt, I think you did a great job with this film. I was nervous about the whole thing just because, you know, it's your family and it gets personal. But I remember watching it, and I watched it, and I was moved by the whole thing, and I felt a real longing for my childhood and the characters of my childhood. So thank you for making it, and I'm gonna leave you with last words if you have anything.
I just thank you guys for letting me come into your life and explore deeply personal aspects that I, at a certain point, was kind of even asking myself, how did I find myself in the mix with all of you guys like this? And I thought that everybody, your parents, you, your brother, came with such openness and such a candid reflection on what you've all gone through, that I think you allowed for this film to provide something a lot deeper than it could have been. And so, and I think you all deserve a lot of credit for that. And I hope that people can watch the film and see a little bit of their own life in your extraordinary family. So thank you.
Thank you, Matt. It was a beautiful film.
Thank you everyone for watching. Tell your friends, your family, your neighbors, strangers in the street about it. It is an exciting film about a complicated, messy, imperfect American family. I'm really happy you made it, even though at times it is painful. I guess all good things are painful. Matt Yoka, thank you. Mom, Marika Gerrard, thank you as well. And everyone, thank you for tuning into AFI. You can watch more cool films, and I wrote it down, at fest.afi.com. There's a lot out there, although I can't endorse them the way that I'm endorsing this one. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Katy. Thanks, Marika.